The same goes for political units, states, nations, as it does for people. We have arguments and fight. We make friends and sometimes even become besties. We create alliances against the bully or just to gain more strength. We've seen the same thing here in Europe, and well, we've had our fair share of ups and downs. A historical move was made after World War II when European states decided to have a special, deeper friendship with their neighbors, and this has become today the European Union. We've also been seeking alliances with other countries, especially our allies in NATO, the US and Canada, and other countries in our neighborhood. However, ever since Donald Trump's first time in the White House, the European Union has figured out that even long-standing alliances can get strained, and no relationship is all that solid. Hey there, I'm Hermine, and in this fresh episode of our series, we're asking, in tomorrow's world, where are our allies? The European Union is getting smaller in population terms and less important economically. So does it mean, will our influence on the world stage disappear as other countries become more and more powerful and team up together? But before you decide you're a lost cause and start packing for somewhere new, let me say, not so fast. While some of the EU's foreign policy instruments are a bit lacking, the bloc still has what it takes to make an impact. And it's picking things up quickly, no matter what people think. In all this discussion, the dragon in the room, and not only for the EU, is China and its impressive state-controlled economy. Washington and Beijing don't get on, and this is likely to have played a part in Trump getting elected. Europe has been trying to work out what kind of relationship it can expect from China. When the country started opening up to the rest of the world, the EU relied on the rules of many different international organizations, especially the World Trade Organization, the WTO, to make sure it was doing the right thing. But it became clear that China did not want to just follow the rules, says Jüri Seilenthal, a Director General at Estonia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's talking to Mars at Kuku Radio.
We see that China does not seem to have considered it necessary to abide by the rules and principles that have guided other countries in their relations with it.
And this unpredictability, of course, makes cooperation extremely difficult. If China keeps going down this path, there's not much hope things will get better between Beijing and Brussels. And with what's been happening lately, the tighter grip on raw material exports, the tensions over Taiwan and Lithuania, it's hard to see the relationship improving anytime soon. But first things first, can we Europeans still rely on our big transatlantic partner in NATO, the United States? Professor Michel Catala, who teaches 20th century European history at the University of Nantes in France, explains to Cléo, a Euradio journalist, that we just need to give it time.
I think that the shared interests of Americans, the fundamental interests of Americans and Europeans alike, remain focused on the alliance. I believe that these will remain shared fundamental interests as long as we consider ourselves to be open, liberal democracies.
Catala adds,
I don't see who could replace the United States as Europe's closest ally, or vice versa, for that matter. So we will just have to wait and see.
Luxembourgish MP Gusti Gras, chair of his country's Foreign and European Affairs Committee, stresses that the EU should take a pragmatic approach. He's speaking to Jean-Claude at Radio 100.7.
We must, of course, try to maintain the best possible diplomatic and economic relations with the EU, but we also have to be realistic. There will be a number of issues that will certainly not get any easier in the coming years, and that is why Europe must think more about itself and show its strength to the outside world.
So it's in this context that the bloc has been looking for new friends in the past few years, trying to build relationships with other countries that share its values. For example, The EU has been trying to develop closer ties with the Indo-Pacific region, like India. Europe really needs to step up its game here. University lecturer Andreas Marchetti has one concrete suggestion for journalist Zina at IMS.
The world's largest democracy, India, immediately springs to mind. I am referring to relations between Europe and India. This is an area that clearly merits strategic development.
Trade talks between Brussels and New Delhi have been underway for nearly 20 years now, and a bilateral free trade agreement could perhaps be concluded this year.
Relations with Japan are already positive. They have been a very close and very important partner for a long time.
The EU has also signed agreements with South Korea, Japan and Singapore, and is currently negotiating others. It's just finalized talks with Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous nation. Countries in America are also of interest, of course, Marchetti adds. The EU has been working more closely with Canada and is currently trying to agree a free trade deal with the South American market Mercosur, which is waiting to be approved, despite quite a few potential hiccups.
But fundamentally, the fact that we are managing to conclude such agreements and are thus implementing a rapprochement between Europe and South America on a contractual basis is undoubtedly the right way to go.
Marchetti believes that to make these deals is definitely the right thing to do, and so bring Europe and South America closer together. But what about old friends? Surely the best place to start our search for stable partners is in our own backyard, the so-called European Economic Area, where countries like Switzerland and Norway is a natural group of friendly nation-states. And since the United Kingdom used to be in the EU, it makes sense that they want to stay close to the bloc, and the other way around. It's not just about being close geographically. Both sides are also already very closely linked in terms of trade and the economy. And after the shock of Brexit in 2020 and the ensuing cooling off period, a more realistic approach to EU-UK relations is now being witnessed on both sides of the Channel. They clearly share common values, such as democracy and the rule of law, and have a similar take on the importance of fighting climate change, supporting free trade and multilateralism. Washington's political change has also brought the two sides closer together. Henrike Bournay, who's the managing partner at EU Opportunity, a European affairs consultancy, is really pleased about this, as he told Alexandre at Portuguese network Renascença.
We represent 51% of UK imports and 40% of UK exports. So we want to have the best possible relationship within these constraints. We're not trying to make them come back or chastising them. The time for that has passed.
Years after Brexit, both parties opened a new chapter in their relationship with the aim of establishing a new partnership in areas such as defense, economic security, internal security, energy, fisheries, and relations between their citizens. They have since concluded several agreements. There still are misunderstandings and tensions, and this is no surprise after such a painful divorce, but the normalization of EU-UK relations is both natural and desirable for both parties. Let's now look eastwards and southward, and we land in Turkey, a key player in the region. Europeans can't afford to ignore it for multiple reasons, including migration, the economy, geopolitics, and security. But it's a complex relationship, and it's gotten a lot worse over the last 10 years. The talks on joining the EU were put on hold, as it looks like Istanbul is moving further away from the EU's political standards and values. But now, it's more about getting things done. So the question, is there any way of strengthening our cooperation with Turkey? This is what Emil, a journalist at BNR, asked Bulgarian political scientist Andrei Velchev from Paisi Hilendarski University.
First of all, we need to be more careful. because there are many pitfalls here. There is not a decrease in protests. On the contrary, they are deepening and becoming far more difficult to solve. The creeping dictatorship there is obvious. There are people from the upper echelon of the military there who no one knows if they are alive, if they are prisoners, or where they are at all. Diplomacy and international relations have one basic rule, that first, you must have a strong internal policy in order to be able to go out into the world and show that you weigh as much as you do internally. And in Turkey, there are doubts about where it is sitting at the moment.
A little further south lies Africa, a vibrant continent with enormous demographic, political and economic potential. Francisco Fonseca Murillo, director of the Institute of European Studies at the University of Valladolid, Spain, tells us more in an interview by Esteban at Es Radio Castilla y León.
As political actors, on a one-to-one basis, we must establish an alliance in which Europe will demand, as it should, a bilateral partnership. Africa is more important and more of a priority than the other BRICS countries: Brazil, China, India, Russia.
At the same time, African nations are actively positioning themselves as influential players, moving from the status of decision obeyers to decision makers, and leveraging their strategic resources, growing economies, and demographic weight to demand a more equitable world order and attractive, diverse partnerships. In other words, Europe is facing stiff competition in its courtship of the continent, while the difficulties of our mutual past continue to weigh heavily on relations, says Professor Michel Catala.
We can see that between Chinese, Russian and Turkish appetites, things are pretty complicated for Europe in terms of establishing a relationship. I would say that Europe's colonial past does not work in its favor when it comes to young Africans, the youth of Africa.
To stop focusing on migration, which is taking attention away from other issues and the usual development cooperation, it should work together with African countries to deal with global challenges like climate change and security, and to develop sustainable development and shared prosperity that works for everyone. European leaders can use this chance to persuade their African counterparts that they can offer a better deal than China. And now the million-dollar question, or shall I say the million-euro question, is, what about Russia? Most Europeans find it hard to imagine peaceful relations between the EU and Russia at the moment. Even beyond the ongoing war in Ukraine and aspiring EU member states, the political elite in Moscow is still really against the European Union. The Kremlin is also known for stirring up trouble and doubt among the bloc's 27 national leaders, using disinformation and cyber attacks to exploit and deepen social divisions. However, Vasilis Nedos, diplomatic and defense correspondent for the Greek newspaper Kathimerini, looks into the unthinkable in a discussion with Nikos and Mariana on Sky.
Europe hopes that someday, when the war in Ukraine ends, as we hope it will regain functional relations with Russia. But this scenario is very hypothetical.
Hypothetical it is, and right now, it requires a lot of wishful thinking. Just one more thing to mention before we wrap up the discussion on future alliances. Some of the experts we've spoken to think that tomorrow's alliances might not be as good as the ones we've seen in the past. They say we're heading towards more temporary and ad hoc deals, where countries team up around a specific plan or purpose. Still, with things being up in the air between the EU and the US, the bloc needs to reach out and find new partners who share its vision. It should also try to broaden a bit its usual scope of action by adapting to the needs of these potential partners. That's for me today. Next week, I'll be back with one last topic on the EU in the world. All the Euranet Plus journalists across Europe will ask the question that naturally follows today's topic. How can Europe make sure we still have a voice heard and stay relevant in tomorrow's world? Until then, make sure to rate our podcast and recommend it if you enjoy it. Bye!